time to turn our attention to the weekend's hurling. James Skehill is on the line. James, good morning to you.
Morning, guys. How are you keeping?
Good, thanks. We might just start with that Limerick Cork game, because we were talking about it a little bit earlier on. Was this a statement from Limerick, a sort of don't write us off too soon? We are back and we're actually kind of getting better in some areas.
Yeah, I think the story with the league, let's say, is not about how you start, it's really how you finish. And I think Limerick are coming into a really good situation now whereby they've got a relatively easy last game to round out the league. They were clinical. They were really, really clinical. Like the kind of words that stuck with me over the course of the game was Limerick were extremely proactive, whereas Cork were really reactive. So Limerick has great structure. I was so impressed by their forwards when they look at kind of the Cork puck out as an opportunity to create a score for themselves. Like historically, you'd look at other teams and forwards would be looking to their backs or midfield to kind of create a score for them. Whereas I think the Limerick forwards now, they suss out puck outs and say, right, we can do our own work here. And they were exception. Like I think they turned over 8 or 9 puck outs in the first half alone, and they just put Cork to bed. You know, whereas Cork looked really extremely reactive. Their execution was poor. Let's be frank about it. I was watching Patrick Collins closely in the goals, and he just looked like he didn't know where the ball was going to go at any given stage. They tried the short puck out for long periods in the first half. Like 9 of those puck outs didn't go to hand. So what that did straight away then was create an element of nervousness for the back, who was immediately closed down with the Limerick forwards. And then that just created a snowball effect where the rot was getting worse. And Cork just couldn't really recover. Now, I will say about Cork, when you look at their game plan and their pattern, they're missing what looks to be like a link man or a big man in the middle of the field who can win dirty ball. Because if you're looking at the Limerick backs, who they're going to come up against again in the future, you're talking about big, strong men. You're going to have guys in there in the middle who are going to be able to win their own possession, win the dirty ball, and feed the likes of Jack Coughlin side, or Jack Connor, should I say, who did great damage for the couple of goals, you know. And I suppose Cork is a tricky one because they didn't have Seamus Harnedy, they didn't start Patrick Horgan. I think there was a bit of shadow boxing. I think they were probably saying, I think Kieran Kingston was looking at the game and thinking to himself, I'm going to throw out a couple of young guys who are relatively inexperienced here. And if they perform well, it might give them a boost going forward against Limerick. That kind of backfired. Let's be frank about it. They had to introduce Luke Meade and Patrick Horgan at half-time to try and pull the thing back and create a bit of just stop the, you know, kind of damage limitations at that stage, you know. But despite Limerick's effectiveness and huge scoring, this Cork only lost by 8 or 9 points. So it's not all doom and gloom.
Absolutely. The one thing though, James, is that if we're trying to read into what was real from Saturday night, the way Cork have been going, I think the short puck out, the way they've been using their restart is real. I think that is something that Cork have targeted as something different for this year and something that they'll be looking to use in the championship. And maybe that is the biggest concern, the way Limerick managed to lock that down. So if you're the Cork goalkeeper, what should your reaction be when that panic starts setting in? Is it stick to the process? Is it try and slow the whole thing down? Is it change the tactics up? What would you do in that position?
Well, first of all, you have to understand, what is the process? And so when you're talking about a process, where do you educate yourself in the process? It's on the training ground. So when I'm looking at a team that whether involved with Galway or whether involved with Captag, the club, I'm looking for a real buy-in from the forwards in the field to help me help them. So like too many people look at the goalkeeper and say it's all on them for the puck out. There's no shared responsibility. That's the way some people look at it. For me, it's all shared responsibility. A huge thing, and I'll go back to Limerick for a second, on the 32nd minute, the Sunday game did a view behind the goal where Barry Hennessy was taking the puck out. And you look at the structure, every one of the Limerick guys knew exactly what they were doing. They were trying to engage the Cork players in some way, shape or form that could either create a short for Barry or a long. What happened ultimately was 4 guys lined up in the middle in the centre forward position. Pat Ryan was in the 15 corner. He vacated it, created a whole channel of space. Barry pops it in there and Tom Barnsley gets the ball. That's pure shared responsibility. That's the process, what Limerick did. Then you flip the coin there, look at Cork and Patrick Collins, and I could see it in his face. He's looking out and he's scanning from left to right, wondering, where am I putting the ball here? And it just screamed to me that there wasn't enough training, and there wasn't enough, let's say, analysis done to identify weak points in Limerick, whereas Limerick identified Cork weak points and they just went straight for it. If I'm Patrick Collins, I think I'm going to have to go, if things aren't working short, you're just going to have to send everybody out and shove it down as far as you can into a zone and try to create something down there. Which is kind of worrisome on one front, because if you're going down long, and I'm looking at the Cork half-forward line, I'm thinking they haven't really got the contestability that Limerick have in the half-forward line. You look at Tom Morrissey, Keane Lynch, Gareth Secretary, they're all winning their own ball primary position. And then if they don't win primary position, Gareth Donovan and Will O'Donoghue who are straight in on secondary possession. So they've got a great pattern to play. Whereas Cork, I'm not sure. I just don't see it. I don't see it. How many times did you see Jim Byrne go up and get the ball over Cork lads, And that's going to be troublesome for when they're trying to create scores. Because if you're looking at Limerick, who had 18 shots in the first quarter with like 11 points, huge efficiency. How many shots are you going to get against Limerick? You're probably going to get maybe, will you get 35 shots? And for you to beat Limerick, you're going to have to hit 90% efficiency. That's an absolutely massive efficiency rate. Whereas the average in hurling nowadays is probably 65, 70. So Cork are going to have to really look at the Limerick backs, look at their pattern at the minute they're set up, and try to figure out a way around it. Because right now, there's nothing in sight.
James, if you're a coach trying to set up to play this Limerick team at the moment or heading into championship, and look, Owen mentioned it earlier on, as maybe the lack of goals the Limerick have scored, it's probably clutching at straws for me to call that a worry. I think they only have maybe one league goal so far compared to Cork's 14 or 15. 7 of those, granted, came against Westmeath. But if you're a coach setting up against this Limerick team at the moment, are there any areas of that Limerick team or of their style of play that you can target and say, okay, that's a weakness, that's something we can kind of play towards?
Yeah, I'm looking at, and I'm not going to necessarily say it's a weakness, but I'm looking at Declan Hannon, and he's in the 6th position, and he's not, like, the word sweeper has never been mentioned in Limerick's vocabulary. No one has ever identified Limerick and said they play with a sweeper. When I'm looking at Declan Hannon, he's effectively playing as a sweeper for me. He sits off the number 6 pocket, after whoever he's marking at 11, and then the midfield guys cover him. On dead balls and place balls, yes, he's pushing up marking 11, but he's always floating around the full back position. So to try and come forward and get on loose ball. I would put in guys on Declan Hannon. I'm going down the middle. I'm going to try target him on a high ball, let's say, and just get runners in through the middle. When you look at Limerick, they've conceded goals. How? It's through pace. Like again, the 2 goals they conceded at the weekend was they were to bypass a half back line and get in behind. I think the full back end, there is a bit of suspect there with regards to pace. Both goals, man was out in front, takes the turn, hit straight for the goal with a bit of pace, and you end up in goals. And Cork, let's say, realistically speaking, despite all their deficiencies, could have had 5 goals. They could have had 4 or 5 goals. That's the many opportunities they had. And they were all created through straight line running, heading straight for the black spot and creating pace. And I think Limerick, what they do as well is they are going to foul you. So they're going to try and kind of protect the house somewhat. If you look at so many still shots when Cork are on attack, there's 6 and 7 Limerick guys back inside their 21, 45, trying to, I suppose, damage limitations. So the ball has got to be really, really fast. I spoke on it last week. There's a zone you have to strike the ball against Limerick. If you strike it from your own 2 and 4 full back line, they're going to eat you up in their half back line. You have to bring it forward up 20-30 yards more, get in over the half back line into space, and then hit them with runners. And I think going down the Kyle Hayes side, going down the Jim Byrne side, I don't think it's going to be good for them on the high ball, let's say, for an opposition team. I think down the middle and in the channels, let's say, left and right of number 6 is a good way to attack them.
The problem, I guess, with that, James, is if you target that area, you can't necessarily just pick out Declan Hannon and say that's who we want to go at. There is a number of other bodies in there, which is the whole point, I guess, of him being in there almost to plug that gap in front of the full back line.
Yeah, there is, yeah. But like, you're going to have to, if you're going to beat Limerick, you're going to have a couple of workarounds here. Like there has to be a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. You can't just go in with the one plan and then scratch your head in the middle of the game wondering why isn't this working? You know what I mean? I spoke last week about how reactive Limerick are after the water breaks. And I think if a team went out and targeted like a Declan Hannon person with that channel, you would see Limerick would readjust after the first water break, or certainly after half time. They're going to have to come with a couple of different game plans, And like, I think goals, you have to get goals against Limerick. You're not going to beat them in a shootout. I think we've seen that now in the last couple of weeks. They're shooting 25, 30 points at their ease, and like from various angles. And I think if you're going to beat Limerick, you have to have 2, 3, even 4 goals, if I dare to say it, and hit them straight down in the full back line. That's the way I think.
Let's talk a little bit about Waterford against Galway, James. I know you were watching this game for us at the weekend. This was an absolutely cracking game. I just wanted to start by talking about the most famous hurler on the pitch in Joe Canning. I know it's an easy one to go to, James, but he looked so good on Sunday, just maybe in a way that we haven't seen too much. Like, his game intelligence is obviously something that everybody's been aware of for a long, long time, but his ability to bring his teammates into the game was notable on Sunday, wasn't it?
There you go. You just touched it. You took the words out of my mouth. I think in years previous, I'm going back a few years ago, Joe would have obviously been recognised as the best player on the team, and I think he would have tried to carry that mantle and do an awful lot of things himself. He'd have tried to win his own ball, shoot everything, score everything. Whereas I think where he's at now, he's in a good place in the sense that it's not necessarily he has to do everything himself, but now he's making guys around him better. And like, when you've got a person like that who, as I mentioned earlier, can unlock a defence with a flick. If you take the last goal, for example, like they dispossessed Ozzy Gleeson, and Joe just with a simple flick, he sets up Brian Cannon for what's really an easy finish. And that's a prime example of a guy who was winning the ball and making it for his teammates have an easy finish, have an easy job to do, so he's making them better. And there's a really good balance in the forwards at the minute. Like they can multi-change. Like the 6 forwards can play in either position, so they have a good unit. And I think Joe's still key to that. He's 33 in October, and there's no real signs of it. He's got a lot of mileage on the clock. Let's be fair, a lot of years done, but he looks awful fresh. He's as lean as I've ever seen him. I saw him after the pitch up close, and like there isn't a pick in him. So he's put himself in the best position to have a really good summer. He's put through an awful lot of hard work. When you look at Joe, you think people would automatically think of sidelines. They think of the magic goals, but they don't see the hours in the gym. They don't see the early morning runs, and all the work he's done throughout lockdowns by himself to get himself into a condition that's going to be a facilitation for a heavy summer. Like when you think he's 33, his metabolism is not as quick as it is. He has to work that bit harder. He's had a lot of injuries, as I just said, so he's going to be stiff and sore every morning, but at least he's keeping on top of it and he looks in prime shape. Fantastic.
Well, what is Joe like in the dressing room and around training then, James? Is he vocal in his leadership? Is he clearly the main man, even if you didn't watch any of the available talent play hurling?
No, I think what Galway would have had a really good set of leaders, let's say, so he doesn't have to be the whole focal point. Like you won't see him saying everything. Like obviously when he says something, like so many others, people listen, and he's a great example for the young guys because his work ethic in training is second to none. He's always trying to get training. He's always trying to do a bit extra with his place balls. That's why he's, like, from a practice perspective, that's why he's still the best at sidelines and frees and whatnot. He does more. I would say Joe will lead more by action than through words, which is the best type of leader for me. Because when you're in a heavy championship game, let's say, you often can't hear words, because obviously for crowds and whatnot, not in this game. But for me, body language is about 70-80% of your communication on a game. So when I see Joe going well, let's say, and he's leading the charge, heading down the middle like he did for one of the goals in the first half of the last day, that's the kind of leader I want to see. So words, he doesn't have to do that. His actions on the field, he's fantastic that way.
James, I guess while we're dishing out praise for players who played well in that match of the weekend, I just wanted to get your thoughts on Callum Lyons, because he's someone who, for Waterford fans, is an incredibly exciting player. Extraordinary performance again at the weekend. 5 points from play, I think it was. And what an athlete this guy is. We talk about, how almost professional GA has become in terms of the attitude of the players, the training they put in, the nutrition and stuff as well. But when you see Callum Lyons going up and down that pitch at the weekend, what an incredible athlete he is. Just how good was his performance?
Yeah, he was excellent. Now, I'm not trying to sound negative or dismissive here, but I wonder is wing back where his name is, that his best position. He scored 5 points, yes. But also as a defensive unit, Waterford, the forwards conceded 423 from play. That's like, again, I'm not trying to be dismissive or negative. I'm just wondering, is that his best position? Should he be wing back? Is he more suited to midfield where he can do, or even a Keane Lynch type role? Keane Lynch is playing at 11, let's say 11 is on his back, but he's 8, 9, 5, 6, 7, he's everywhere, let's say. He kind of has a free role. And so, like, if you have an athlete who's as prime and athletic and as Callum Lyons is wing back really his best position? Is that where he's going to do the most damage for you? Or is he going to be probably the creation of damage by him going forward the whole time? I think probably Waterford, what they do is they're looking at like the Kyle Hayes type person who is bombing going forward, let's say, doing great damage. And that's great for TV, that's great for the fans to view. But again, I go back to Limerick, they have a system that covers Kyle Hayes when he shoots off. So Kyle Hayes goes up the field to get a point, but there's someone straight away to cover him. And, he's part of an overall great unit, defensive unit. I don't think Waterford are there yet. I think they still have major deficiencies in their half-back line. I don't know, is Ozzy the right man for 6, but I think it's just a case of who's left. You know what I mean? Because Tyke de Burker would be obviously the number 6 there. I'm not really sure. Like, we obviously don't have major access to what Waterford are doing during the week. I'm not sure why Kevin Moran isn't getting more game time. Like, again, the number 6 nowadays, let's say, he's more of a vocal communicator, kind of an organizer, general of the back. So I can't see why Kevin is not playing 6 and Ozzy up further up the field. Like, maybe Ozzy could do a job for you at number 5 and release Callum Lyons. But there's no doubt what you said. Like, Callum Lyons is a fantastic athlete. He's a really exciting prospect. Like, between himself and Ila Daly and Desiree Hutchison, they've got new guys over the last year and a half that can really add to Waterford. I think it's a case. I'm looking at Waterford and I'm saying, who's their link man? So like what I mean by that is that, like, the link between the backs and forwards is who's a bit of a creator. A bit like I've used the Bruno Fernandes, the Kevin De Bruyne kind of thing, person who can take from the back and bring it forward. It's Keane Lynch in Limerick, it's Cathal Mannion in Galway, it's Noel McGrath and Tipperary, and I just don't see it in Waterford. And that was really evident in the second half of last day when there was a bit of a breeze, and the only way they could get a bit of ball in was to fire down to the 13 corner where Jesse Hutchinson was essentially left to his own devices. Now, he did a lot of damage, don't get me wrong, but in championship games, you can't expect one forward to do all the damage for you and try to win off frees. So I think there's more questions than answers come out from the Waterford performance. Yes, Callum Lyons was fantastic the weekend, but I think Liam Cahill still has a lot to answer.
So do you think Austin Gleeson would actually be better deployed at wing back rather than centre back?
I do, yeah, absolutely. I 100% do. I think Ozzy would, if he's given a more of a, I suppose, a hurling role, if that makes sense. Like you look at, again, forgive me now, I keep using Declan Hannon as the example, let's say, but there's a defensive system set around him, let's say, that facilitates him to do what he wants. And like Declan he recognised the pattern of the play. So how many times do you see Declan Hannon coming off a shoulder of Sean Finn or Rich English, who's facing the ball? So what Declan will be doing is he's obviously recognising the pattern play up front before he gets the ball. So he has that free time to be assessing the situation. As soon as he gets the ball, it's delivered and they've set up an attack. And I think if you had someone like Ozzy Gleeson or Kevin Moore who could be in the six and who could be facilitated that way, you get more. Like Kevin has a really good delivery of a ball. You know, he's got a great brain experience, so he could fill that role well. Ozzy Gleeson, then he's obviously got himself in great shape and specific workout routine or program, and so he's trimmed down. He looks fit. I just don't think he's suited to marking people. I think he's suited to people having to mark him. So I think the more forward you're pushing guys, probably the better is for Waterford. Like into a midfield or half-back midfield is probably the most idealistic place for him. Getting the ball to him could be tricky if you push him up too far to the pitch. That was the age-old question with Joe Canning for years. But now we see what when you have the link man who can get the ball in, the damage that's going to be created there. So I think I don't have the answer. But I think Ozzy, let's say at probably for me, number 5 or number 8 is probably the best place for him. You know, try to give him a bit of a free role and a bit of a challenge to work to.
James, can I just ask you about the scoreline in that game? I mean, 428 to 323 is quite incredible, and just shows how far hurling has come and where it's headed, I guess. Interesting comments from Henry Shefflin quite recently talking about the GA maybe having to consider modifying the slitter, maybe outlawing scores from longer range frees perhaps as well. But I almost feel like it's like when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. You're starting to think, okay, once it's broken out, how far can this actually go? How far can the human body take it? I mean, how far do you think hurling can go in terms of score lines here? Because, I mean, do you enjoy these kind of back and forth yo-yo scoring battles like Galway Waterford at the weekend, or do you think maybe along the lines of what Henry Shefflin is saying, that maybe something needs to be done to kind of curb it somewhat?
Yeah, I just think I think GA people are a small bit guilty of trying to use their theories to prove a fact, whereas I like to use a fact to prove my theory, I'd say. So I'm looking at the weight of the sliotar, and it's a hot topic, and everyone says make the sliotar heavier. But a good story for you, let's say 2005, Galway played Cork in the Ireland senior final. We played Limerick in the minor final beforehand. After we were doing the compulsory lap of honour with the cup, the Cork mentors had set up their pre-warm-up drills, and of course me being with me. And I just happened to come across them during the week there. They were Neil's balls with high rims. So I decided I'd weigh the ball. I took out the porridge scale anyways, and I weighed the ball from 2005, 16 years ago, and it was 112 grams, excuse me. And I weighed a new ball, the All-Star Cummins ball, the yellow one that we have, that was 111 grams. So the ball from 16 years previous was one gram heavier, or lighter, should I say, excuse me. But the major difference in the ball was the rim thickness. Now, the only sport that I can think of where no rims makes a huge difference is baseball. So like, you look at baseball, the weight of the baseball is 145 grams. So that's 30 grams heavier than a sliotar, 30 odd grams, you could say. And the average distance of a home run is 125 meters. So the weight of the ball has absolutely nothing to do with it. It's all about the rims. So when you look at the rim thickness, let's say, in the GA terms, it's supposed to be between 2.2 and 2.4 mil. But I can tell you 9/10 of balls that are dished out nowadays are aimed at sails. And so the rims are really, really low. They're less than a mil. You nearly rub your finger over them, and you'd nearly feel nothing. You know what I mean? So it's all about the rims, the aerodynamics. And hurlers love low rims for 3 things. 1, obviously the ball travels far. 2 is because they can get their touch perfect. The ball won't bounce off anyway. The ski will off it there. The last one is when they strike the ball, it keeps a true line, so it's dead straight and doesn't veer off. So I don't think the sliotar has anything got to the weight, or has nothing got to do with it. It's all got to do with the aerodynamics of the rims. And I do think the rims need to be increased a small bit. They don't need to go to massive levels where you're hitting 3-4 mil and they're taking the hand off you when you're catching them. They just need to be increased a bit, and in the distance the ball won't travel as far. Because it has got to a stage now whereby, free takers going back to their own 30-yard line, You know, like if you're a forward, you know, give away a free in your own 30-yard line, I think Jesus, the goalie going to come out here and pop this, you know. So it's like something will be done. I do think something will be done in the near future. I think the rims are going to have to be increased. I think Croke Park will come back in and pick 4 or 5 sliotar manufacturers and get them to increase the rims and say, and I suppose half the problem will be sorted thereafter. Another issue that was raised during the week was the size of the hurls. I do think the hurls the size of the boss are gone crazy. I see some of the guys down in our club here now, and I'm putting my hurl and I'm overlapping them, overlaying their hurl over mine, and their hurls are bigger than mine. I'm the goalie. So, I mean, I think they need to be shortened down a small bit, let's say, with the width of the boss. You know, there's guys swinging frying pans out there outfield, and that all facilitates itself to long distance shooting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there is a couple of things to look at. I don't think it's doom and gloom. There's so much negativity surrounding the ball and the shooting and everything. Like, we want free scoring, of course we do. But the argument with regards to the weight of sliotar is completely refuted when you look at the weight of sliotar 16 years ago and now, and you look at the weight of a baseball and how far that travels. So there's a couple of little tweaks, and I think we're fine. You know, what's more worrisome for me, guys, is the free count. You know, like you look at Tony Kelly and TJ Reid in a couple of weeks ago, 20 points and I think 118 respectively, and about 15 place balls each. That's the more worrisome thing for me. It's the way that the games are being refed. And I think if you look at 90% of club games around the country, what we see from a ref perspective in county games at the moment, in some county games, should I say, is what you see in most club games. You see the rules being applied to the letter of the law. And I see, I'm guilty of it myself, guys, when you're in a game. If there's any little question over foul at all, I'm screaming at the ref to give it to us. Because you can probably sway him a bit. You know, you can probably get on him a small bit. And when the crowds are in a game and there's a bit of a contentious foul or a little tackle that normally you get away with, crowds are on the ref and they'll give it to you. You know what I mean? So I think what the spectator wants in inter-county hurling is free-flowing hurling without stoppages. We don't want breaks. We don't want to turn out like rugby where the TMOs are overruling the game here and there's so many stoppages and the rugby game has taken 2 hours. You know, we want fast, we want pace, we want adrenaline. We pride ourselves in hurling being the fastest field game in the world, and that doesn't facilitate itself when you have the ref stopping every now and then. That's a bigger issue for me than sliotar.
100%. There is something spontaneous about an open play effort from 100 yards that goes flying over the bar where there might have been a man on, and people are still enthralled by that. But it is the fact that TJ Reid can put the ball down 100 yards out from goal with no one challenging him, and everybody expects him to put it over, which kills the spontaneity. For me, anyway, that's the issue. That's fascinating stuff on the ball, James. We must get into that in greater detail in future. Maybe even have a look at the rims and maybe your tiny hurley as well that you seem to be using inside in goals. You need to get a bigger one for yourself. James Skehill, great stuff as ever. Thanks a million.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.